All right, today we are tearing down the Intel Arc B580 video card from the Battlemage Edition. Now, when we tore apart the Alchemist cards, I just really injured my finger. I slammed the PCIe slot down on it. We're gonna pretend that didn't happen. Nobody saw it. When we tore down the last one, it was a problem. Oh, Intel. Come on. Really? What is happening here? This is so disappointing. Oh my God, this is fragile. What the hell? Lots of screws, there was some glue, some tape. Not a big fan of it. So we're gonna see if Intel improved. Quick fun fact, Andrew, who is behind the camera, and I both have to get on a plane in a couple hours. So we need to be very efficient today because we're going to see Der Bauer. And well, Roman, if I missed the flight, it was because this had to be done. So I'm sorry in advance. Okay, we gotta get moving on this. This thing is a flow-through design. You can see that Intel has taken what, well, Sapphire kind of used to do it a lot. NVIDIA really ran with the flow-through. We saw an improvement in thermals in something like a 4090. This is a much lower power consumption GPU. If I'm talking fast, it's because we have to get on a plane in a couple hours. Let's get to the ad and then do the teardown. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermaltake and the Tower 600 case. The Tower 600 is a vertical case design with Thermaltake's unique showcase presentation, which stands out further with its separate chassis stand kit that rotates the case for an angled showpiece. The Tower 600 is heavily ventilated around the sides, has a ton of radiator support including up to 420mm solutions, and offers 2 GPU mounting options for display and cooling optimization. It also comes in colors not commonly seen in cases. Learn more about the Tower 600 at the link in the description below. All right, so we have our alien abduction lighting set up for the teardown. You can see we've got the light here and the light here, the one Andrew just walked into. And all of that is because it is very important that we are able to see every single grease print on this shroud. That's right, Intel has chosen the type of material that will show, no matter how clean your hands are, every single interaction with the device. So I look forward to when this is not cleaned for the next several years, and one day we pick it up and they're just baked on there permanently. Okay, let's do a walk around and then take it apart. So obviously this is an Intel Arc card. It is a B580 as indicated by the name. This particular model is Intel's in-house model. Their partners have some as well. Partners like Sparkle, for example, can do whatever they want as usual. So this is not a B series, but they're doing something basically the same for the B series. That's an A series card. So for the design itself, they're going for something more similar to the, this card is so gross looking with the fingerprints, but we don't have time to clean it. Got to get on a flight in a couple hours. So there's 2 fans. This is really similar to that 20 series era design where it's not like NVIDIA invented it. It was just something they used commonly. It's got the vertically oriented fin stack. It's only a 2-slot card, which these days is kind of unheard of, but in the $250 class, a lot lower power, a lot lower heat, that makes more sense. So relatively thinned out fin stack up here. They've got to make room for the capacitors. We'll see when we tear it down. A little bit thicker on this side. 8-pin PCIe. Partners can do, I mean, technically whatever they want. I don't think you're going to see more than 2 PCIe connectors though. The flow through is a relatively large area, which since this goes straight through, that means the PCB is cutting off somewhere around here. And so with that shorter PCB, allows more room to push the heat straight through the card, which in testing with the 4090, now there's a really specific high power situation, we've found upwards of about 5 degrees in performance improvement for thermals in A/B testing with the 4090, basically with flow through versus covered flow through, like completely obstructed. It's not a perfect test, but it's pretty damn close. It's about as close as you can get without some kind of simulation. So anyway, that's the benefit of flow through, and they're going that direction with this card too. For the rest of it, they've really simplified things in terms of the LED setup. So that's a light, but that's it. And then hopefully there's not a bunch of glue and tape this time. Come on! Looks like we are using Torx screws. There's 6 of them. I can see there's a tamper seal over here. Let's start taking those apart. Ooh, it fits. That's a T6. Okay, let's do it. That's the tamper seal. We can't get in that one. Well, the teardown's over, everybody. Intel has foiled us once again. I don't think I'm stripping the screw right now, but I can't see it through the sticker, so anything's possible. So this is our mod mat for anyone who might want one. This is an anti-static PC building work surface with a screw tracking grid on it, which I'm going to use because probably someone else is going to have to put this together after we leave. So they'll have all the screws in the right places. I'll also add that there's a somewhere out there, last time I had to rush to catch a flight, there's a TSA agent with a knife that says "Be Quiet" on it. That came from the company Be Quiet. I might have accidentally brought to the airport. It was not particularly valuable, but it was a knife that said "Be Quiet!" exclamation point on it, so I was a little nervous about how it was going to go. Fortunately, he really liked the knife, so we were all good. All right. Well, plastic backplate. So these are not my favorite because they're insulators. The card thermally, we don't have a thermal chart in the review. It was so huge, but it did okay, which is why there isn't one in the review. And we'll probably have some more detail later. The backplate, though, when there's a backplate, it's nice to see some kind of metal with some thermal pads between it and the back of the PCB, because they can actually have an impact. We've seen about 2 degrees in sort of the less meaningful scenarios. The lowest we've ever seen is basically 0. But in the right configuration, basically with thermal pads on the back, the memory module is on the opposite side because they're flip chip BGA, so the memory is typically, the actual silicon is closer to the PCB than it is to the top of that black square module you'll see. With thermal pads on the back side into a conductive, potentially higher surface area plate, there can be an advantage. Sometimes it's a couple degrees. We've seen more than that in some really specific scenarios with MSI Evoke cards, I think it was. But anyway, don't like to see plastic. All it does is insulate things and, in this case, collect fingerprints. So that's unfortunate, but I don't know. I guess it's a cost-saving thing. They wanted, these days, not having a back plate, I guess, means you don't sell anything. So a little bit of a loss of an opportunity there. But because the card is not super high heat, they can get away with it. It's okay. It's just, I'd like to see a little better, but I'm also, it's not make or break. So we've got, this is a little different. We've got 2 connectors on the back side. All right, we're going to get the same size Torx screw for this. So these are the 4 retention screws that looks like a leaf spring that they're going through, retaining the cooler to the PCB itself. These particular screws are free. They're not captive. Okay. Leaf spring is technically little tiny piece of like adhesive sticking out from under the mylar or whatever here, but I'm not going to call it glue. It's not quite rising to the level of glue. Ooh. That's the leaf spring, or at least the retention bracket. All right, we're going to get the PCIe slot off. So this is, like I said, a 2-slot card, which is rare. And then it's got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws in it. So this is interesting back here. It is heavily perforated, but the fin stack's vertical, pointing this way. So the air is going to go up and down on the card, which means slotted into a motherboard in kind of typical orientation. You've got warm air coming towards the glass and getting pushed towards the motherboard. That's not special. It's not really different. But they've ventilated the back here, which you normally see with a card that at least has some way for the air to escape out that direction. It's not a bad thing. I mean, air is just going to naturally move in and out regardless. So it is a good thing. It's just that they've kind of, it's ventilated in a way that would be nicer on a card that more actively moved air through that channel. We're going to have the coefficient of grease and the stand-up ability. That's how I'm going to review this at the end. Coefficient of grease, very high. As it approaches 1.0, it's basically you've got on the far side there's no grease, and on 1.0 there's bag of French fries from Five Guys, which is what this is. It's like when the grease is so much that it actually just chews a hole through the bag before you get home with the order. That's kind of where I'm sure Intel really appreciates this. That's my feedback, Intel. All right. So we're ready to get in here. This is a very tiny PCB, which is awesome actually, because for stuff like small form factor builds, this opens up lots of options for partners, or just, I don't know, water cooling would be kind of silly on this because it's just not enough power to matter. Very easy to disconnect. The cables being on the backside, I actually kind of like this. So, all right, I wasn't sure about the cables coming through the backside and connecting here. Here's the reason I like it. Pull off the back plate, plastic as it may be, and instant access to cables, very easy to disconnect. One of the things that I've not liked dealing with in the past is when the card kind of pulls apart, but it's tethered by the cable on the inside connected to, obviously, the fans running through the heatsink, and getting in there and disconnecting everything. This is, I don't know what you want from me. This is our alien abduction lights. Anyway, pulling it apart was pretty easy just because of how they're out of the cable. So that worked out better than I thought. Now inside, so we've got a piece of silicon that is very long. This is an abnormal shape. This is actually more similar, I would say, to something you'd find in a laptop. So longer, narrower piece of silicon. We'll get we already have the area, but we'll get some measurements in a second. There's 2 memory modules off on this side. It's going to be sort of the east of the card when you're looking at it face on. There's some memory modules up top here, so we've got the other 4. And then connection to the MOSFETs. They've gained some weight. The MOSFETs over here directly connected to a flatter part of the heatsink. We'll pull that off in a second. This is sort of that harder clay like type of pad that'll deteriorate a little bit when I pry it off. And otherwise, we'll look at the heatsink solution in a second as well. So let's look at the PCB really quickly. Look at that nice, that like excellent sort of NES that's been in the sun for 25 years, yellow surrounding the silicon. Let's wash that and see what it looks like. Now, I'm told that last time we did a teardown of an Intel card, Tom Peterson watched it, was not responsible for their heatsink construction, and so hadn't necessarily seen it all until that time. And my understanding is that questions were asked and conversations were had. And now we have something that is way easier to take apart. So genuinely good job, Intel. This is so much better already from just a mechanical standpoint. So no text on the actual die, which is, I mean, fine. It's technically better. You can see I'm guessing this discoloration. Someone who's more of an expert on like actual electronics assembly, I'd love to hear what causes that. I know it doesn't matter, at least not as we've tested it, but it almost looks like a little burned in some spots. And so I'm assuming it's just sort of a pre-production or final assembly speed step where I wonder if you take apart a full retail card, if it looks like that, because I've never really seen this discoloration around the GPU itself on other cards we've taken apart. So I'd be curious to hear from the audience what causes that. I'm not worried about it, but anyway, let's get a quick measurement. So roughly like 10.8 or so. I try not to get too close and scratch the die. So roughly 10.8 by about 25.3. 2.3, what's that come out to? Ooh, that's pretty damn close. So according to Intel, it's 272 millimeters squared, and we came up with about 273, which is pretty damn good for an external measurement. So it looks like maybe a 6-stage solution for core over here. We've got one off down here. I'd have to sort of trace it. There's a couple other scattered around. But it looks like it's going to be 6 for the actual GPU core. And I think we can move over to the cooler now. So, yeah, okay. So they are, okay, do that. That's just from the grease alone. There's no other reason I can do that. So that protrusion there just comes down to meet the memory, and otherwise it's cooling through a thermal pad, which is normal. There's an exposed copper cold plate that contacts the GPU silicon directly. Let's just wipe that off and see. I think that's got a protrusion as well. Yep. Now, years ago, we actually tested did some AB stuff with protruding copper cold plates versus those that didn't. And for GPUs, sometimes there were benefits because of how flat GPU silicon can be, relatively speaking. Where I guess in that situation it was adapting. For anyone who remembers the EVGA hybrid coolers, the reason it was beneficial is because it was adapting that sort of the Asetek cold plate with a little bit of a curvature to it to a GPU, which is flatter. So they protrude it out, flatten it, square it off, and then that was a better solution than mounting just a circular sort of convex or concave solution from Asetek, depending on which perspective you're looking at it. So anyway, I guess it'd be convex is how you'd look at it. So. All right, MOSFETs. Cooling is directly contacting just a flat plate in there. That's also pretty normal. And now I'm going to take the actual heatsink out of here. So there's a base plate that's connecting that to everything. There's the base plate. This is actually metal. This is more providing some structure. Doesn't seem to have any major contact patches. Sometimes you'll see these contact the VRM or capacitors or something, but this is just a plate. And then inside there, we've got the PCB with power and LEDs on the opposite side of it to form the LED top plate, which is right there. So that's all that is. Nothing too special. I guess it is nice. Actually, this is a really nice attention to detail element. So they have routed and managed this cable. They built a specific cable channel for it. This is a metal that I'm holding right now. They've routed the cable through that, just taped it down. This is one of the few uses of tape I'm okay with. It's for holding cables down. And then you can see that just routes from here. So that's their power and ground. So that's nice. It's a nice touch. Good attention to detail, holds it all in place, and it's not obnoxious to disassemble, which we sometimes see as the counterpoint. All right, internally, so very standard fin stack. There's nothing special at all about this. Sometimes you see companies trying to do wavy stuff. They'll punch a bunch of holes through it. EVGA called it pin fin. It had a marketing name. I don't know if it had a patent or not, but they would sort of punch holes through, clean shot to let some air get out the other side. In this case, it's just a standard fin stack, really simple, nothing really to speak of here. For the heat pipes, they've got 4 that I can see right now going straight through. Now with heat pipes, you want as much coverage of the pipe over the actual silicon as possible. It looks like they're going to get 2 that are sort of dead center on it, and then 2 out at the flanks. And if we measure the heat pipes, those look like 6s. It might be a marketing 6. That's 5.8. That's 6.2. Good enough. Between the 2 of them, they're 6 millimeters. All right, last thing we're going to do is just pull a fan out. Now the paste that was on here that I cleaned off looked like a PTM pad. These have been in use forever. NVIDIA's been using them for a couple generations now, I think. Placing the fans might be a pain in the ass. Not the worst, but okay. So to get into the fan, you've got to take the whole thing apart. And then there's a couple more screws on here that would release the fan, and another one could be socketed in at this point. Now, this is kind of like a wish list item. I think recognizing the cost component of it, maybe not something you'd see on one of the cheaper models of a card, but something I've always really liked from XFX, actually did great with their Ghost series, was these socketable fans that were awesome for RMA and things like that, where it was a pin to pad. My understanding is it was a little more expensive. I don't know if they had any reliability problems outside of just sort of the cost, but they basically, it was typically one screw, fan popped out, you pop another one in, and because there were no cables, because it was pin to pad, you didn't have to take the card apart to replace the fan. That was always really nice. Very rarely seen. Don't really see it on much of anything, but I like to point it out whenever I get a chance. All right, internally, so they've just got one cable connecting the two, bridge them, they feed it out to this, which is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-pin cable. I guess they're 4-pin fans, so that probably makes sense. And then that connects to the back of the video card that we saw earlier, which you can do just because it's a really short PCB. And so that's the whole fan enclosure. So that is it for the card. We will make the flight, but it is definitely time to leave. So thank you for watching. Check out our review of the B580 and see how it did for performance. We have a lot more we need to do with it, but the video before I cut it down is 42 minutes long. I just got an update from Mike. He's editing it right now. We'll see how long it comes out, but there's more to do yet, and we'll have that up for you. As far as the assembly here, massively improved over the last try. So Intel doesn't do, I don't think, much volume of these cards that it makes. It seems to be relying on its partners more this time. So they've got ASRock, Sparkle, Gunner, however you say it, and a couple of others. So I don't know that they're going to do a lot of volume, but seeing this improvement is important, and the last one was an absolute nightmare to work with, at least one of the two of them. So glad to see that. Okay, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly, and we will see you all next time. Don't